You. We are now recording. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Shirley McCormick, and I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of the Harrisburg area. And on behalf of the League, I want to thank you for joining us this evening and welcome you to what we consider an important aspect of our democracy, and that is selecting a legislator to represent us. As I said, we are recording, and the recording of this will be available on our website in a couple of days. And for everyone who has registered, I will send you an email telling you when the recording is there and available. So if you need to leave early or you want to review something that was done, you can go and view the recording at that time. This is important because the League of Women Voters, you may or may not know, does not support any candidate or any political party, and we do not oppose any candidate or any political party. Our purpose for the past 101 years has been to encourage people to get registered to vote and then provide them information to try and educate them about issues, about the candidates, so that when they go to the polls or they do a mail-in ballot, they are making an informed decision when they cast that ballot. And tonight is a prime example of trying to educate the public about a very important thing. The person who will fill the seat in the 48th Pennsylvania Senatorial District. The 48th district is currently vacant now because of the untimely and unfortunate passing of Senator Dave Arnold in January. So it's been vacant in this time, and thus in the May primary on May 18th, there will be a special election to select the person to now fill that seat. So unlike most primaries, the winner of that election is not going to show up on the November ballot. They are going to take the deceased Senator Arnold's seat immediately and serve out the rest of his term, which will go through December of 2022. So you need to be aware that this is different than all those other candidates you're voting for, and that all registered voters, whether they're independent, libertarian, Green Party, whatever they are, and live in the 48th district, they can vote and select who will be their next senator. So that's important to pass on to people so that they understand that. The 48th district is large and very diverse. It includes all of Lebanon County, and in Dauphin County, it includes the municipalities of Conewago, Londonderry, Swatara, and Lower Swatara townships, and the boroughs of High Spar, Middletown, Paxtang, Royalton, and Steelton. It then crosses over the river and goes into York County and includes there the municipalities of Conewago, East Manchester, Newberry, and Spriggetsbury Township, and the boroughs of Goldsboro, Lewisberry, Manchester, Mount Wolf, and York Haven. Very large area, diverse people living in that area. There are 4 candidates who are anxious to serve as that senator, and we have invited all 4 candidates to be with us this evening. However, it is my sad duty to report to you that the Republican candidate, Christopher Gebhard, did not respond to our invitation. We've emailed, we've phoned, we've done various things to contact him, and we have gotten no response at all. The other 3 candidates, however, have agreed to participate, and our league policy says that if we invite everyone, which we did, that is running for the position, and at least 2 of them respond in the affirmative, we can go forward. We've had 3 positive responses, so we will present them tonight. I am just very sorry that you're not going to hear the position of the Republican candidate on the issues that we're going to bring up tonight. But let me tell you who the candidates are you will be hearing from, and I'm going to present them to you alphabetically by last name. So there doesn't, just because your name is Zink, you would unfortunately be last, but this is somebody always has to be last. We have Dr. Calvin Clements, a semi-retired veterinarian who is running on the Democratic Party ticket. We also have Mr. Ed Krebs. who is running on the independent Get People Together party. He had served in the House of Representatives in Pennsylvania from 91 to 2002, I believe. And the third candidate we have with us tonight is the Libertarian Party candidate, Tim McMaster, who worked in IT, but is currently farming. We have a more detailed bio that each of them wrote on our website, lwvhbg.org, but we didn't want to take the time tonight to read this. So after you hear from them, you may want to visit that website under the resources tab and check out their entire biography to see they have very rich and varied backgrounds that they are bringing to the office. If you, when you registered online, you saw there was an opportunity to present questions, and we have gotten quite a few questions. And we appreciate and thank you for all of those. And they are covering the gamut of anything you can think of. So we're going to have some very good questions. These questions have not been shared with the candidates. Only one question has. They received in advance, and that will be the first question that they're asked. But they are hearing for the first time the rest of the questions with you tonight. You also may have seen that Laura LeBeau was to have been our moderator. She is the news director for the Lebanon County radio station WLBR 1270. Unfortunately, she called me last week, having just gotten out of the hospital with an emergency gallbladder surgery. So she's not quite up to par this evening to be with us. But we are very, very fortunate to have with us in her place Corinna Wilson, who is president of Wilson 500 Incorporated, a public and strategic affairs consulting firm. She has also been a journalist, a corporate lawyer, a lobbyist, and a trade association and not-for-profit executive. She was the head of content of Pennsylvania Cable Network, PCN, until 2014, and she has extensive on-air news and moderation experience. And I'm losing my voice, so it's a good thing I'm done talking now. I'm turning the program over to Corinna, our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley. And thank you so much to the Harrisburg Area League for sponsoring tonight's debate. It is so important. And I'm just going to take a minute to review the ground rules for the debate, although I know the candidates are familiar with them. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the first question, which they were given in advance. The league has asked me to remind you, please don't take any of your time to thank it or me. We want to hear from you on the issues tonight. I will be asking questions, most of which were submitted in advance. I have a few of my own, but most of them were submitted by your potential constituents. I will begin alphabetically, and I will rotate, starting first with Dr. Clements and moving forward to Mr. Krebs, Mr. McMasters, and then back to Dr. Clements and so forth. After the first question, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the subsequent questions. There is no rebuttal time allowed. If you want to rebut something that another candidate says, you must use part of the allotted time in the next question. At the end of the debate, each candidate will be given 2 minutes to make a closing statement. And we will begin that portion of the debate with the candidate who was to be first in line for the next question. There is a league timekeeper, and I will also be keeping time. You will see the league timekeeper holding up reminder signs. You will see me do this if you're going over, and we do reserve the right to mute your microphone if you go over beyond finishing a sentence. I anticipate I might spend a little bit of time tonight reminding you to take yourself off mute, but that's okay because we're all used to that now, right? And I will begin now with the first question, which you received in advance, but I will read for the benefit of our participants, our audience here. And you will each have 2 minutes to answer the question, which is, how will you work with the legislators and the administration to achieve consensus and bring positive solutions to our serious problems? Dr. Clements.
So good evening and thank you. My name is Dr. Calvin Clements, and a lot of you know me as Doc. And I am here tonight to introduce myself and to try to earn your vote. And the big thing about trying to change what is going on in Harrisburg is exactly what my campaign is about. We need to return to a course of civility. We need to return to a course of bipartisan negotiations. We have totally disbanded that in the last few years, and all we do is continue to fight on the left and the right, and we really accomplish nothing. My goal will be, as your senator, to sit down with both sides and listen with an open mind and an open heart so that we can achieve the goals of producing legislation that will move Pennsylvania in a forward direction. That's something that we just haven't been doing. And we have serious problems in Pennsylvania. We have the problems of unfunded pension debt. If we don't resolve that problem, the state of Pennsylvania is going to go into bankruptcy. And of course, every taxpayer that owns property can tell you the unfunded pension is driving their school taxes straight through the roof. We have issues in Pennsylvania with right now the COVID crisis. We need to get our businesses open. We need to get our people back to work. We need to be sure that we can get our schools open, and we need to be able to keep them open and open safely. So the only way that we're going to be able to accomplish that in an effective manner is to sit in a bipartisan manner with common sense. It's just a nuance. We just have to balance things and talk to each other like people. There is no reason why we can't have adversarial positions but still like each other. And if we do that, then it's very easy for us to find common ground. And that's something that has just been amiss in Harrisburg these days. And every time you open the paper, you see articles from the right or from the left, and they're nasty diatribes about how we're doing things incorrectly, and we haven't accomplished a thing. So my goal will be, as your senator, to sit down in a bipartisan manner and to listen to everybody's opinion and see if we can't come to a common ground where we give and take, and we develop a format for passing effective legislation to deal with all of the problems that we have.
Thank you, Dr. Clements. Mr. Krebs.
Okay, you had said that I had served in the House for 12 years, and I served 12 years because that's what I said I would do. I believe in term limits. But basically what I would do is, first of all, I'd talk to my friends in the Senate and in the House, and I'd also talk to the governor. The governor signed my nominating petition because when I'm elected, he will be one of my constituents. He lives in Mount Wolf Borough, which is in the district. And the fact is, since I was in Harrisburg for 12 years, I know about 25% of the senators already. And I know a lot of House leaders because the people that came in with me are now in the leadership. For example, the president pro tem, I remember when he was the legislative assistant for Rick Santorum. You go from your experience and the people you know. And also I have another hidden asset. I have a wife who also served in the General Assembly, and she's known by a lot of the leaders. And so I will build on the people that I know. And from there, I will talk to the other people. When we worked in Harrisburg, when I was there, we fought till 5 o'clock. Then we went up to Hack and we played basketball together. And I picked the team based on their basketball skill, not on whether they were R's or D's. And that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to build teams that'll solve each issue that we need to deal with. And I always have left my party label at the door. And I plan to do that when I get to Harrisburg. I'm there to represent all Pennsylvanians, not just the independents, under whose label I'm going to be elected. Thank you.
Mr. McMaster.
Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Tim McMaster, and I am also not a career politician like Mr. or Dr. Clements. I am a farmer. I'm a citizen of the 48th district. I'm a father. I'm a son. I'm a husband. and I'm a concerned citizen. I'm a concerned citizen that sees what's going on in Harrisburg with the vitriol, and I don't like it. And I want to be the candidate that moves into Harrisburg and says, yes, I am a libertarian, but I'm willing to work with Democrats, Republicans, independents on good ideas, not based on party, but based on principle. And that principle is the freedom of the people, the liberty of the people, and be that lower taxes or property tax reform or legalizing cannabis or any other institution or any other problems that we have with our current state in Pennsylvania. Sorry, public speaking is not my forte at the moment. So I am here to ask for your vote for me to defend the liberty and the freedom of all people of not just the 48th district, but of the entire state of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you. This next question, we will begin with Mr. Krebs, and it is, if elected, what would be your top 3 priorities after taking office?
My top 3 priorities, one would be gerrymandering. We are fighting for a very gerrymandered district, and it violates the 2 principles of the Constitution, which says connectivity. There are no bridges across the Susquehanna, so you have to go outside the district. It's not connected. And the other thing, it's supposed to be compact. Look at its shape on my website, and you can see that when it has East York, Springettsbury Township, it has Steelton on the edge of Harrisburg and Paxton Borough on the eastern edge of Harrisburg, and it has Greenpoint in Lebanon County. You know, there's no commonality. So therefore, that's what I'm going to do, is work on that, and also farmland preservation, and also education. We're in disaster in education, particularly in higher education, and I was chair of the higher ed committee, a subcommittee. Thank you.
Mr. McMaster, same question, please.
My top 3 priorities are: number 1, I want to reopen Pennsylvania completely with 0 government mandates. Business owners and the people of this district are smart enough to know what precautions they need to take to keep themselves, their customers, and their families safe. And it doesn't need top-down oligarchical control from Governor Wolf to tell them how to do it. My second priority is going to be property tax reform. There's no reason why, once your home is paid for, that you should be essentially renting it from the state government. And my third priority is going to be instituting constitutional carry in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Clements, please. I think you are muted, Dr. Clements.
I don't believe.
There you go. Oh, nope, you're muted again.
All right.
There
Hear
we
me
go.
now?
Yes.
Okay, so
We'll
I'm
start-
sorry.
No worries, and we'll start again.
All right. So like Mr. McMaster, I want to open Pennsylvania, but I want to open Pennsylvania safely. I want to be sure that when we do that, we open our schools, that they're open safely, and that our communities are open safe. And I'm going to have to disagree with him that he said that Pennsylvanians seem to be smart enough that they can do that without any mandates. If you happen to be watching TV in the past 24 hours, you saw that we were rated probably one of the worst right here in Lebanon County, 17% vaccinated, and with an increased rate of 40%. I still think, unfortunately, because of the way that this whole crisis was mishandled, that people are still under a lot of misconceptions, and so they will need guidance for us. Other thing that I want to handle right away is that we want to be sure that we get this voting thing under control. We want to be sure that everybody who wants to vote has the ability to vote, and they can vote without any problems in terms of registering or any complications of getting their ballot, and they can do it with ease. I do want to continue mail-in ballots, and I do think that we can make alterations to Act 77 that will make the mail-in system much happier for all sides. And then
Thank you, Dr. Clements. Your time has expired. And next we'll start with Mr. McMasters, and the question is, and you've all touched on this, but if you could amplify, please. What experience and capabilities make you especially suited to serve in the office you're seeking?
I think one of the biggest things that qualifies me for that is the fact I haven't served, that I am not a creature of Harrisburg, that I am a citizen who wants to defend the freedom of the people of this district and of this state. And I don't think that being establishment politician and having been so ensconced in that system, as corrupt and cronyist as that system has become, I definitely don't think that that is a benefit to anyone who values their freedom, who values their liberty. Thank you.
Dr. Clements? Dr. Clements, if you would unmute, we'll start the clock over.
Sorry.
No worries.
For the past 35 years, I've run my own businesses and I've taken care of many people's beloved family pets, and I've worked in the community. And during that time when I was building my veterinary practice, I built a chain of 6 veterinary clinics, and I had about 57 employees. I was the person that built the business. I had to balance a budget. I had to live within the means of that budget. I created jobs. I worked with legislation and regulation, and I understand what it means for people to struggle. So I think I have a pretty good grasp on the ability of being able to work with people and accomplish the goals that I set out to.
Mr. Krebs?
I view the legislature as family, and I have been part of that family. And some of them are corrupt, that is true. But generally, I know who the honest people are, and I will try to build coalitions with them to solve our problems. And that is the important difference between these other 2 men and me. They think not being a politician is a plus. Well, the reality, I thought when I went to Harrisburg, I ran on the first time, I will go there and I will do this and I will do this. No, you won't. You won't do that because you need 26 senators and you need 102 legislators and you need a governor to solve the problem. And I think because of my experience, I had the best chance of solving some of the problems. Like, we haven't passed a real budget, a balanced budget, since I left the legislature. And hopefully I could be there by June and help them come up with a real budget rather than one of these smoke and mirrors budget where they rob all the pots of their money. The pots are basically empty. And so now we're going to have to either raise taxes or cut programs. And both of those are going to cause a lot of the members to lose the best job they've ever had. And that's going to take a delicate touch to come up with the compromises.
Thank you. The next question is, which committee appointments will you seek if you were to win office? And we will begin with Dr. Clements. Oh, Dr. Clements, you need to unmute, please.
Far down, and that'll just do it. I'd like to be on 2 committees. I'd like to be on the finance committee because we need to do something about this unfunded pension debt. And I'd like to be on the agricultural committee. And I'd just like to kind of take a second and circle back here a little bit, because I think that one of the problems that I have is that it's kind of difficult for me to say, well, wow, that prior experience was great, when Mr. Krebs and Mr. Krebs' wife were both people that signed that bill for the unfunded pension debt. I don't think that's something that probably really says that we did a great job while we were there.
Mr. Krebs.
I think I lost the question. Could you repeat the question of that response?
I certainly can. Which committee appointments will you seek if you were to win?
Okay, I basically would seek the education and the agriculture committee, because that's where my background is. I was the vice chairman of the ag committee in the House, and I was chairman of the subcommittee on higher education. But in reality, I'm not going to do what they're talking about. I will not organize with either the Republican or the Democratic caucus. And that's going to cause a lot of problems because the space is allocated to the Democrats and the Republicans. I'm not going to ask or organize with them. They're going to have to provide the independence of space. And that is something that has not been done in Harrisburg. And I think that starts my message.
Thank you. Mr. McMasters.
Thank you. As a libertarian, I think the two best committees for me to seek would be the Government Oversight Committee and the Committee on Ethics, because those are definitely two things that I think a libertarian perspective of less government, more freedom would definitely benefit from having that perspective. And I'm certainly not going to make any friends as a libertarian being there, but there are other libertarians in the state on the ballot as well, who I believe also will win. So there will be at least a fairly strong libertarian presence in the General Assembly come the 18th of May. Thank you.
Thank you. This question is actually just for the for Mr. Krebs and Mr. McMaster. So I'll resume the normal process when we are done with this question. Mr. Krebs, you alluded to your answer, but I want to make sure that we're clear. And the question is, which party would you caucus with? Mr.
I would
McMaster?
caucus with neither party, because that is part of the problem. They think they own the Capitol. They've divided the space, the actual rooms, into Republican space and Democratic space. I'm coming as an independent. I want independent space. If I have to, I'll pull a trailer up in my parking spot, and my office will be in the trailer in my reserved parking spot. But again, I may not even have a parking spot, because that is allocated by party too. So I don't know. Maybe I'll have to rent a piece of space on somebody's property close to the Capitol and use my cell phone as my communications device. And I can use that with a hotspot. I can even have computer. I will do that, unless they actually realize that it's the people's space, not Democrat or Republican space. Thank you.
Mr. McMaster.
Well, like Mr. Krebs, I'm absolutely not going to caucus with either the Democrats or the Republicans. I truthfully don't view them as being all that different at the end of the day. I would hope to be caucusing with another fellow libertarian who's going to win his seat on the 18th as well. Short of that, I would also demand that there be a spot for not just libertarians, but independents as well. I think the two-party system in this country is, in fact, part of the problem and part of the reason why we're in the dreadful shape that we are. Thank you.
All right, and back to our normal rotation, which is beginning with Mr. Krebs. And the question is, do you agree or disagree with the statement, voter fraud is a major problem in Pennsylvania elections?
I totally disagree. I think we had one of the most honest elections we've ever had. And really, the claim of voter fraud has been used by people that have been in the minority in hopes of suppressing the majority so that minority can rule. And that is a problem with democracy. I think every vote should account, and every voter should have access to the ballot. And I find the new mail-in voting ballot a great help, because it allows people to study the issue, particularly in a primary where they have 6 people running for the school board. They don't know any of them, and they have to go in and they got a minute or two to vote. And one of them says, well, I'll vote for all the men. The other says, I'll vote for all the women. Why don't they make an informed vote? If they do it from home, they can go on the internet and they can study the candidates' positions and make an informed vote. So I just feel that voter fraud is not an issue. There are some things that need to be fixed in that voting act, but they're minor. Thank you.
Mr. McMasters.
Obviously, any degree of fraud needs to be investigated. I certainly don't think that this most recent election had widespread fraud. That's absolutely not something I believe. But I think going forward, we need to make sure that the validity and integrity of the election is maintained, because once the voting public loses their confidence and loses their faith in the electoral system, I believe our whole system is lost. Thank you.
Dr. Clements?
But I have to echo exactly what both of these gentlemen have said, that there wasn't any evidence in this election of any widespread fraud whatsoever. And it is disheartening that in my county, we've had a couple of representatives that have run around and wagged their tongue about voter fraud et cetera, going to different committee meetings and just barking out loud, making the general public believe that, oh yeah, there must be something about this. It really is disheartening that anyone that would think that they are a statesman, that they're representing people, would put any validity to such a falsehood. And again, I'll echo what Mr. Krebs said. There are a few things about Act 77 that are problematic. One of the things is that it's absolutely ridiculous that we didn't do an earlier pre-canvass, because then we probably would have reduced the suspicion of voter fraud, because we would have had the vote counted earlier. But no, we definitely had really no evidence of anything substantial, and that was verified from Bill Barr on down.
Thank you. The next question will begin with Mr. McMasters, and the question is, what is your position on the 2 constitutional amendments on the May ballot that would affect the governor's role in making emergency declarations?
As they reduce the power of the executive, I am 100% in support of both of them, as I am also with the other ballot initiative that's on as well, that I'm sure we'll probably get to a little bit later.
Dr. Clements.
I'm firmly against both of those because they do reduce the governor's power, and they do it in a way that gives that power almost back to the legislature. Let's just look at facts. We've waited 25 years for the legislature to do anything about the unfunded pension debt. I mean, you know, if they'd have done something about it 20 years ago, it would have been $20 billion. Now it's $75 billion. And I don't know just how much higher will it go. I mean, I guess we can just imagine. I just don't think that the legislature is competent enough to sit down and recognize the seriousness of some of the things that are going on. I mean, it was pretty obvious that with some of the things that they said, that 9th grade science wasn't their strong suit.
Thank you. And the next question, we will begin with Dr. Clements. And the question is, do you think that police violence against Black and brown Pennsylvanians is a problem? And what would you do?
Corinna, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you want Ed Krebs to answer the question?
Answer the question.
The
Oh,
last-
I am so sorry, Mr. Krebs. Did I leave you out?
I thought I could escape.
No, there's no escape, and I apologize.
I am against both of those. I mean, the one in particular, the idea that you arbitrarily ended the governor's power in 21 days is ridiculous. Look at COVID. It's a year or more later, and we're still having a surge. And do you think the General Assembly would have, in a timely fashion, given him power back? You can't do things like that. I mean, an emergency is an emergency. And if there's anyone I don't want to have to make the decision in a short period of time, it's the General Assembly. They don't work that way. Dr. Clemens was saying it took 25 years to even try to address the pension fund, but that's an interesting question because he took shots at me there, but we can talk that if there's a direct question on the pension. Thank you.
Thank you, and my apologies again. We'll start with Dr. Clements with this round. And the question is, do you think that police violence against Black and brown Pennsylvanians is a problem? And what would you do to address it if so?
This is a sad question, and it's one that I think is fairly complicated. But yes, I do believe that police violence against Black and brown Pennsylvanians is something of very high concern. It really is disturbing, and I think that we have seen in the national news just the number of times that police violence has been excessive, and in some instances has been fatal in their interaction. And we need, if I were a senator, what we would need to do is that we would need to have an immediate commission that would examine this whole topic and come up with recommendations that would make the problem much better than it currently is. We just need to start looking at things like qualified immunity. Are those topics that are giving people a pass, and should they end, and should we make people responsible? You know, I'm a doctor. Doctors don't get qualified malpractice. If we injure something, we get sued, or we lose our license, or worse.
Thank you, Dr. Clements. Mr. Krebs.
I think that discrimination against non-whites has been there all along my entire life, and probably since the late 1890s, when the Daughters of the Confederacy made a campaign to restore the glory of the South and make the Civil War fighters that killed Union soldiers heroes. And I think what happened today with the conviction in Minnesota is the start of a long, painful process, but we will overcome that. We finally recognized, we saw the death of Mr. Floyd, and it was a murder, and we saw it in 9 minutes. And it's something that I've never seen before. And I think it is a turning point, not only in Minnesota, but across the nation. I think we will have serious progress in this area. And hopefully by the time my grandchildren are adults someday, since they are also not white, they are mixed. I hope that we will fulfill the promise of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McMaster.
Well, obviously, I'm absolutely disgusted by police violence, especially police violence against Black and brown people. I mean, we need to continue to say their names, the Breonna Taylors of this world, the Greg Longenecker of this world, the Duncan Lemp from Maryland in this world. It's not going to be long before something like that happens in this district. And it's not necessarily confined to just Black and brown Americans. It's all Americans who are being stomped on and having their rights trampled by an out of control police force, largely because of things like qualified immunity. So that's one thing that I would definitely work for in the Senate, is to end qualified immunity completely in Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll start this next round with Mr. Krebs. And the question is, we're seeing big programs, expensive programs coming from the federal government in response to the pandemic and the subsequent economic downturn. Would you support state counterparts to these kinds of programs or other kinds of state support for the recovery?
Well, I think we are in a unique emergency situation, and I think we need to use the resources that are being given to us to solve some of our problems and make sure that we actually solve them, rather than just waste the money like it's free money, which we seem to think it is. We have a structural deficit in this state, and we've got to bring that under control. And I think we have to use the stimulus money in a thoughtful way to do that, so that it impacts our taxpayers the least. And I just don't mean just balance the budget for 2 years because we got stimulus money. I mean, you seriously look at your whole structure and what you can realistically support. And you use the stimulus money as a way to get us to a sustainable future. We are not on a sustainable future in this state. We are in a fiscal crisis of unimaginable proportions. Like example, they had to do a special appropriations for the PennDOT in November so that they would have money to plow the snow. You may not know that, but you look at it, we have not dealt with our infrastructure problem. We're in a fiscal crisis. The stimulus money is a bridge that helps us get to something sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McMaster.
Before I give that answer, I just want to make sure that I understand the question completely. Can you repeat it, please?
Sure. We're seeing big programs, expensive programs come from the federal government in response to the pandemic. Would you support state counterparts to these kinds of programs, other kinds of spending at the state level to support folks in response to the pandemic?
Thanks. Excuse me. I would absolutely not support printing more money to pay for stimuluses. We can call it a stimulus all we like, but when we see things like $1.8 million of federal dollars going to the state that's supposed to be used for mortgage relief, that's getting sent to build prisons or to pay for prisons, that's waste, that's fraud, that's abuse. And anytime that the state accepts money, accepts a handout, or call it a stimulus if you like, from the federal government, we know by the time it gets to the state, it's going to get put somewhere where it wasn't intended to be used, and it's going to get wasted to pad someone's pocket. And as George Carlin reminds us, it's a big party and you're not in it. So the voters of this district and the voters of this state need to know that the more money the federal government tries to pour into this state, all they're trying to do is buy votes, and you're not going to get that money. You're not going to see any of that stimulus. It's going to go to their big corporate crony partners.
Dr. Clements?
Well, it's absolutely wonderful that this last COVID relief bill was actually designed to help Main Street, because the prior two COVID relief bills trickled down to no one. The guy that makes the pillows, My Pillow guy, that's worth $350 million, got $700 million worth of relief money. And my restaurant guy up the street here got BIPCA, he got nothing. So it's great that we're getting money into the state, and it would be wonderful if the state could match some of that money to help to repair infrastructure and things of that nature that truly need to be done on the long term. But hey, this state's broke. It's absolutely broke. It's worse than broke. They have to generate $2.5 billion a year to pay for that unfunded pension debt. It is criminal that they allow that pension debt to go on for 25 years without directly addressing it. And somebody saying, we got to do something serious about this before it got to this level. It's almost to the top where it's almost impossible to handle.
Thank you. Next, we'll start with Mr. McMasters. And the question is, the governor has proposed moving the minimum wage to $12 an hour in July with incremental increases until we reach $15 in 2027. What do you think the minimum wage should be, and how do you think we should get there?
I believe that the actual true minimum wage is zero. If you don't show up for work and you don't get a job, you get paid zero. And I think setting an arbitrary number like $12 or $15, why not make it $100? All it does is inflate and prevent entry into lower positions or entry-level positions or part-time positions. All that's doing is hurting the small business owner, because a large corporation like a Walmart, they can afford to absorb that cost into their overall business plan. But a small business, a small farmer like myself who hopes to employ folks, or a small veterinary practice like Doc Clemens has, all that minimum wage is going to do is going to prevent them from hiring somebody, or it's going to force them to fire somebody to keep a small number of people employed.
Thank you. Dr. Clements.
I have to take major exception with pretty much most of that conversation. And the fact that I had 57 employees when I retired doesn't make me too terribly small. But when I hired people, I hired most everybody way above what was the minimum wage at that time. In fact, we started most of our employees, except for the part-time summer help, at $12 an hour, and been doing that for a number of years. And the interesting thing is that you get more loyalty, better production, and the practice grows faster when you pay more. This whole trickle down thing of we've seen from Washington, D.C. and wherever for years and years, just always boggled my mind. Good farmer doesn't throw his seeds in the sky, he puts them in the ground. Feed those people at the bottom and they do better. It raises their level of living. It takes them off of welfare. We pay less taxes. They have a better quality of life. They buy more things and the economy expands. It's really time for us to get our heads out of the sand on this backwards economic model.
Thank you. And the next question will begin with Mr. Krebs. And we
Right,
are.
maybe I should answer that one first.
Did I skip you again? I must have something, a bug in the system. I am so sorry. No offense intended.
No, I know, actually, it's easier not to answer questions. You sit here and just, I'm learning a lot. But basically, I would support that. Actually, from a competition standpoint, I think we should have a national minimum wage so that we don't have the poor people running from one state to the other to get a couple dollars, because either when you look at it, the 2,080 40-hour week, when you say $12, that puts somebody up to $24,000 to live on. And if they're a family of 2 or 3, they almost half of that at least goes to the rent. uh, they they don't have a livable wage, and we have to do that. We have to get us up there to point this idea that the person can't live at 750 or whatever our minimum wage is. Let's be realistic about it. You barely can eat. You can't pay the rent. Uh, so you live out of your car until it falls apart. I don't know. We have to really get serious about how we level the playing field. Our economic model is really bad at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we're going to actually start with Dr. Clements with the next question. And we're going back to something I think all three of you have referenced, but we'd like to talk more about it. And it's, what is your position on Act 77, the election reform bill that passed last session, particularly with respect to mail-in ballots, and anything else you'd like to comment on for this legislative session?
Really wish that my Republican opponent was here tonight, because that's the big thing that he has on his webpage. It's the first thing he's going to do is he is going to work to repeal Act 77, which I just absolutely think is ridiculous. This was the first election where the largest number of Americans had voted since 1960. We excelled that level. And I think that participation in the election is a good thing, not a bad thing. And the mail-in ballot was one of those things that allowed that to happen. Were there some problems with Act 77? I think we've said that. Some things needed to be a little bit different, and some things needed to be better set in stone. But we know that why they were altered, because all of a sudden it was interesting that the U.S. mail fell apart. But yeah, we should pre-canvass earlier so that the votes are ready to be counted. Pre-canvassing doesn't mean we count the votes. It just means we get them out the envelope and get them ready to go in the machine so that they be counted on the day of the election. But Act 77 is a wonderful thing. It lets more people vote. It gives us better voter access. And there hasn't been a hint of integrity issues associated with Act 77. So I want to see it continue. We can just improve upon it.
Thank you. Mr. Krebs.
I think that Act 77 was also a great improvement. Basically, it start moving us away from the voter suppression model that has been used to keep both independents and people of the other party from voting. I mean, just think that the independents have not been able to vote on the judges or the school boards in the past. Now they, at least, only the Republicans and Democrats could vote on them. And it's really sad. And we have a problem with voter suppression. And Act 77 was a giant step forward. And we got to improve it. We got to, where there are some known deficiencies, we got to improve it so that we do make sure that the people have confidence in the vote totals. But to get rid of it, like the Republicans suggest, takes us back into the dark ages. And it also was very helpful when I didn't need to go there because I was in the vulnerable category for COVID, and I voted from my kitchen table. I look out at the voting booth across in the fire company, and the people are standing there in lines. I didn't want to stand in lines with them this past year.
Thank you. Mr. McMaster.
Naturally, any law that improves or increases access to the voters to actually vote, I'm going to support. I find it wildly ironic that suddenly the Republicans are up in arms against Act 77. They've been trying to relitigate an election for the last 6 months, when in 2019 it was passed in the General Assembly in Pennsylvania with broad bipartisan support. So anything that would be wrong with it falls both on the Democrats and the Republicans. So I too wish our Republican counterpart was here to maybe answer that a little bit, but I certainly wouldn't repeal Act 77. I think we can all agree it's not perfect law, but it is certainly a heck of a lot better than what we had, and it can obviously be improved going forward. But what must always be maintained is the integrity of the vote, so that the people have faith and they have confidence in the system.
Thank you. Now we will start with Mr. Krebs, and we are going to the most popular topic that we had for this debate, which is redistricting. We've got many questions on redistricting. So at first, a broad one to start, Mr. Krebs. Pennsylvania voters want a redistricting process that is transparent, accountable, and includes robust public input. How will you work to make that happen?
Well, first of all, Fair District is having a crossing of my legislative district on the Susquehanna. And I think today they asked me if I would consider canoeing. That's the first thing I will do is I will canoe across the Susquehanna from the eastern part of my district to the western since there are no roads. But seriously, I support everything that's in the Fair District legislation. I think the new version, the old version was Senate Bill 1242, which Senator Arnold voted for, and it's now Senate Bill 222. I'm in full support, and when I get there, I will push the people in the Senate to actually vote it and get it passed into law, and ask the governor to sign it.
Mr. McMasters?
Like my independent counterpart there, Mr. Krebs, I also will be at both of the Fair Districts events next week because I believe that all people of all counties in this district are exceptionally important. I'm not going to just focus on one county or another, especially when the small parts of York and Dauphin County, population-wise, have roughly the same population as the entirety of Lebanon County. I think that the way that this district has been gerrymandered is absolutely appalling. It essentially disenfranchises almost fully half of the electorate in this district. So absolutely, I am 100% in favor of supporting and working with the Fair Districts PA people to get fair districts, to get rid of gerrymandering.
Thank you. Dr. Clements?
Well, I think that we all pretty well recognize that gerrymandering is just another tool in the Jim Crow 2.0 tool bag. I mean, you gerrymander a district, and then what that does is puts people of color at a great disadvantage. And that's something that we just need to stop doing. And when you cross the river and talk to people in the lower part of District 48, I mean, they kind of tell you that we're the red-haired stepchildren of District 48 because you come down here when it's time for an election, and then it's Hulu. We don't see a whole lot of you there. I mean, the Fair District Act is a perfect way of solving this thing. I like the idea of having a totally independent commission that will draw the districts and has nothing to do with a single politician. That's difficult to get their politicians' hands out of that whole thing, but there are states that have done it. And when you talk to the people of those states, when that issue is discussed, they are much happier citizens than in a highly gerrymandered state like Pennsylvania.
Thank you. And now, unless I skipped anybody, we're going to start with Mr. McMasters for the next question, which is about how we select appellate court judges. Do you think that they should be chosen by the voters? And if not, how would you have them selected?
I would absolutely have the voters select appellate court judges, and I would make sure that those judges are up for re-election frequently because laws certainly change. Judges can develop certain biases over time. And the one thing that we definitely
Mr. McMasters, it looked like you inadvertently muted yourself.
Sorry about that. It's a space.
No worries. Would you like to start over again? We'll start the clock again.
Sure, that's fine. I would absolutely want to see that the appellate court judges are selected by an election because they need to be held accountable to the people that they are essentially standing in judgment of, and they should be up for re-election frequently. Their records and their judgments should be made public. They shouldn't be lifetime appointments. They're like any other position. You need to justify your existence to the voters and either succeed or fail based on your credentials, your success, and your failure. Thanks.
Dr. Clements.
We absolutely should continue electing in judges by the voter. We definitely don't want them appointed, and I'm absolutely opposed to having the judicial districts gerrymandered has been proposed. And I know that that bill's been tabled, but I'm sure that it'll rear its ugly head again some point in time between now and next November. We have a very good collection of judges, and the distribution of them is nicely appropriated across the state. There isn't any evidence that judges are collected around large metropolitan areas, as they'd have you to believe. So let's continue voting them. Let's continue voting for them, and let's leave the way that they're elected alone. Everything is perfect.
Thank you. Mr. Krebs.
I guess I disagree with both the individuals here, because this is one of the things we vote on. And people can say they can do this, this, and this, but actually what I would do is I would vote on a commission that would actually select the judges based on legal scholars that know what the rulings of all these judges are, so that we can better get qualified judges. The vote I would give would be for the commission that would then select qualified judges. For us as individual people who know nothing about the legality of many things, we're making an uninformed vote, because words are cheap, actions are really tell the thing. And by being able to look at rulings that they have made, this commission could then come up with really qualified people to be in our appellate courts.
And I'm going to take a moderator's privilege, if you will allow, and follow up with Mr. Krebs and Mr. McMaster, starting with Mr. McMaster, specifically on the bill that Dr. Clements referenced, House Bill 38, Representative Diamond's bill, that would organize the judicial elections into regional districts instead of at large. So if you would comment on that bill, regardless of whether it's been tabled or not, Mr. McMaster.
I would absolutely support making the judges or the judiciary districts much more regional based. The closer that the judges are to the people, absolutely. I don't know who on earth would oppose that. But I did want to circle back to something else that Mr. Krebs has said more than once now. He's referenced that he doesn't feel that the voters are smart enough to decide either on their own who their judges are or who they are represented by. And I take great offense to that. And to reference something that Doc Calvin said, he referred to those of us here on this side of the district, because yes, I am from the York County portion, as the lower part of the district. I would correct him and say that we're on the southern side of the district, as there's no higher or lower portion of the district.
Mr. Krebs, if you'd like to comment just specifically on House Bill 38.
Yeah, I think it's
regional-
a terrible bill, because what it is, we're not gerrymandering the judges. And we have the same bad results that we have with gerrymandering the legislative seats. And the thing is, I have great confidence in the people and can make judgment. But sometimes you have to admit you don't have the time to study the qualification of the judges, and all you get is their political literature, which may or may not be true. Having qualified people study and then picking from the pool of qualified people is a better way than for me to make an uninformed vote. Who do I vote for? I've always voted for the guys that weren't from Philly or Pittsburgh. Is that really what I should be doing? But that was my general rule. I knew nothing about the judges, so I voted, if they weren't from Philly or Pittsburgh, I vote for them. And if it was one from Lebanon County, which there never was, I would have voted for him. But I'll vote from the guy from Dauphin because he's close.
Thank you.
I'm making
Thank you.
uninformed votes on judges. I don't care what Tim just said. I mean, we can disagree on that, but that's fine. I still think he's a fine man.
Thank you. That is time there. We'll start this next round with Dr. Clements. You've actually referenced this several times already in your responses, but if you would talk about your solution to the pension, state pension difficulties that we have.
The unfunded pension debt is going to be a very tough nut to crack, because it's large, and it's been, let's say, endemic for a good number of years. they started to make moves to take the unfunded pension debt away from people, and yet we still have about 200 representatives in the legislature that are getting unfunded pension debt. Number one thing that Senator Clements does is that he proposes that all unfunded pension debts are unfunded pensions stop now. They're done. Okay, I realize it's in the Constitution, and that's going to probably require a constitutional amendment. But hey, if we can amend the governor's powers, we can certainly amend their powers. And then we have to start looking at other income streams to start paying down that $2.5 billion a year. You know, and then that starts getting us into things about discussions of wellhead tax. I mean, we're giving away our gas. They come here, we give them money to drill, we give them money to set up, we give them all kinds of tax credits. They take our gas, they give us nothing. That gas belongs to all of us, not just to the property owner that gas was on. That gas is deep underground, but because it's drawn from somebody's property, they get some money for it. But every state resident should.
And that's time, Dr. Clements. Mr. Krebs.
Okay, I voted for the last pension increase. I was leaving that year and I knew I was taking the pension. I wasn't pressured to vote for it. I voted based on the fact that for 5 or 6 years, the state said it was so flush that it didn't need to put money into the pension fund, and neither did the school districts. And so therefore I said, well, the only people funding the pension system are the people paying into it. So let's give them back some of their money, since we aren't paying for it anymore as a government or as a school district. And the reality is, my solution now, what I would do is I would take away the pension of the legislators. Basically, I would say, if you're going to come, you can do a number of years of service, but if this is not going to be your lifelong best time job that you've ever had. These 30 and 40-year people that leave with more than their salary, I would have no pension. It would actually be public service. You would serve for whatever number of years you want to serve. Then you have to go home and start to build your retirement fund, because you wouldn't be building it in the General Assembly.
Thank
It
you.
takes a constitutional amendment.
Thank you. Mr. McMasters, please.
But one of the first things that I would do is I would stop issuing any new employee any pension. Anybody that starts working for any government agency that offers a pension, sorry, it's not affordable. It can't be done. Unfortunately, the pensions that do exist are a contract, and contracts need to be fulfilled. One of the first things I would do is I would try to get immediately from the governor all the way down to the most junior senator or House member to take a 50% pay cut to pay for the pensions that are already out there and existing. I don't think it's that much to ask for a governor that's making close to $200,000 a year and was a millionaire before he even started to live on a little bit less. Anybody that's read my biography on the page knows that I used to be a professional wrestler. So it's a matter of priorities. And when I was a professional wrestler, I could get by on $25 a weekend and 2 hot dogs from the concession stand. So if you really, truly want to get by on less money, you will find a way to do it. And cutting spending is absolutely the first way.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Mr. Krebs, please. And the question is, how will you help dairy farmers?
How will I help dairy farmers? I hate to say it, but having been a farmer, technology has basically put them in a bad box. And I don't know that we can save a large part of our dairy industry, because technology has made the 1,000 and 10,000 herd size more economical than the smaller ones. And the thing is, I don't know that we can save them. And that is frightening to me, because I watch in Lebanon County, the dairy farms are shutting down, and their next best hope is you see 3 Bell and Evans chicken farms aside of the dairy barn, empty dairy barn, because the economics are such that the thing that we see in our valley, our valleys, where these dairy farms, well, I grew up when, some people were milking 5 and 10 cows. It went to 50, went to 100, went to 200, went to 500, went to 1,000, and now it's going to 10,000. And the economies of scale are such, and technology is such, that we've stopped drinking milk too. So, I mean, I don't know that we can save our dairy industry, but we got to start and talk about it, because people are not drinking cow's milk. They're drinking almond milk and all other kinds of milk. And the thing is,
That your time has
That's it.
elapsed, Mr. Krebs. Mr. McMaster.
So some of the big things that are affecting dairy farmers in this region, and I'm very close to several dairy farmers. I have dairy cows on my farm, so this is a very, very close personal subject to me. Every bottle of milk that's sold in Pennsylvania, there's a 25-cent tax on it. That tax goes to the corporation, and lots of times those corporations are out of the state or out of the country, so that needs to be addressed. If you have two separate herds on your farm and you're selling them to two separate, or you have one herd on your farm and you're selling them to two separate disparate companies, you have to have two sets of equipment, two sets of infrastructure for both each separate company, and that is absolutely untenable for the small farmer. And what that does is that creates a barrier to entry for the small farmer or the longtime farmer who has been in farming for generations but is only has a small herd. Now with all these regulations and losing this extra income, now they're not making enough money to succeed with their small farm. And as Earl Krebs told, or I'm sorry, Earl Betts told us in the Nixon administration that farmers needed to get big or get out. And I absolutely do not support that as a small farmer.
Thank you. Dr. Clements.
Well, this is an issue that's kind of near and dear to my heart because my dad lost his dairy farm back in the 50s, just as a result of the same thing. The government turns their back on the dairy farmer. They're ignored. They don't listen to the dairy farmer. And so then they end up going down the tube, and it looks to the dairy farmer, particularly the small one, like they're pushing them out of business and they're pushing towards large corporate farmers. One of the first things that we can do to help the dairy farmer, at least in the short term, is that we can establish a price support. They're getting paid about $15 a hundredweight for a product that costs them $20 to produce. At least if we can help them break even for the moment, then we can sit down with them and representatives of the dairy industry and start working their problem backwards. Yes, their herds are too big. Yes, they're making too much product. They have so many different issues, and I'm going to agree with Mr. McMaster is that there are so many regulations that the small farmer cannot handle. It's built towards a corporate world. I think we really need to work hard to save our dairy farmers in this district. They're an aesthetic thing that we've had for a long time, and they give us a farm culture value. But the other thing is that they're an important tax base. Do we want to
Dr.
see those?
Clements, your time has elapsed. I'm sorry. Thank you. The next question will begin with Mr. McMaster, and it is, do you support a woman's right to make her own reproductive health decisions, including abortion?
Absolutely, I do. 100%. There should be no government body or no person within the government at all that should tell a woman what she can and can't do with her body. I don't even know why that's a question in this day and age, honestly.
Dr. Clements.
All of these issues are between a woman, her partner, her doctor, and her God, and we have no business belonging to this thing.
Mr. Krebs.
I guess I just echo what both of them just said. I've always been a pro-choice Republican. I think it is up to the woman and her God, however she chooses to do that. And it's against Republican philosophy of limited government.
Corinna, you are on mute now.
That's it. We have some kind of a bingo game right now. You can call it bingo. I muted myself. Sorry. We'll start with Dr. Clements. And the question is, how would you improve the funding of public education?
I think that the probably the most precise answer is that there is a Fair Funding Act, and I think that that's something that we need to put in place. Unfortunately, small schools end up getting the short end of the stick. But beyond that, I think we probably need to look at maybe some streamlining of education in school districts. But the Fair Funding Act is something that I'm firmly in favor of.
Thank you, Mr. Krebs.
Basically, let's get to the fact that our problem is the uniformity clause of the Constitution. We need to have a progressive income tax. And what the governor's proposal, if you really look at it, he's trying to get to a progressive income tax through the back door. And that's dependent on the judges. You look at the states that are successful, you can raise the money that you need to fund our schools properly right now, because I I have a big income and I don't pay any earned income tax to the school district. Why? Because we have a 1%. I'm just saying that the real solution is a progressive income tax, which takes a constitutional amendment. And they tried it in the past, and it's always been defeated. And we've danced around the school funding for 50 years, and nothing has changed. And the true solution is a progressive income.
Thank you. Mr. McMaster.
So, as the son-in-law of two educators, both my father-in-law and my mother-in-law were both educators in the York City School District. This is an issue that's very close to me as well. I think the one way that we have to either increase spending would be to, or I'm sorry, the one way to increase the funding would be to reduce the spending. The purpose of the schools is to educate our children. So when I see extemporaneous things like these $1 million football stadiums and soccer stadiums, I see that as a waste, because it doesn't necessarily educate the students or prepare them for a higher degree in education, or even prepare them for life. So I would look at ways that we could cut spending. And if the pandemic of the last year has taught us anything, it's that our teachers and our educators and our school boards are completely capable of finding alternative ways to educate that are both more efficient, more effective, and honestly are a lot less expensive, whether they be school choice, charter schools, vouchers, learn from home, whatever. I think that our teachers, as hard as they work, are also extremely adaptable, and they can figure out a way to do what's best for our children.
Thank you. Mr. Krebs, you'll begin with this question. House Bill 279 would allow undocumented Pennsylvanians to obtain standard driver's licenses if they have an individual taxpayer identification number. The bill would also prevent PennDOT from sharing driver information with third parties. Is that something you would support?
I really can't give you a true answer because I've only heard about that right now. But basically, that's what I've done, and everything. I basically try not to pre-commit on anything, because the way the issue is presented to me may change what position I would take. So I'm not trying to duck this. I just haven't had time to study the issue. It isn't something that I've even thought about. So I don't have an opinion.
Mr. McMaster?
I think, unfortunately, the reason why this bill has even come up is because the legal immigration system in the country is just so difficult. It's so backwards. I think we, as a nation, need to really address that, and we need to make the legal immigration process a lot simpler, so that it removes the impetus to come to this country illegally. But as far as this bill, as long as the individual in question is here and they're paying, they have an individual tax ID and they're paying taxes, I would have necessarily no problem with them receiving a driver's license. I do kind of especially like the fact that PennDOT can't then share that information with the police, because I think the police sometimes get a little too militaristic, especially in this state. So I kind of support that. But I don't have a problem on principle of the bill.
Thank you. Dr. Clements?
I think that one of the things, as I understand it, is that if they have a tax ID, as the bill suggests, and they've kind of basically, in principle, have agreed to the conditions of asylum. And one of the things that I do know is that farmers do need undocumented workers. They do provide a large portion of their workforce, and so I have to believe that it's not terribly a bad idea for them to have a driver's license.
Thank you. And we'll start with Mr. McMaster on this round. do you support it's Senate Bill 104, which would amend the state election code to end what is called prison gerrymandering by using the last known place of residence for incarcerated persons for the purpose of the reapportionment, the census redistricting, instead of the correctional facility residence?
So prison gerrymandering is probably one of the absolute worst parts of gerrymandering in general. So I absolutely want to see that eliminated completely. There's no reason why people who are serving time in one county are counted in that county when they may live completely across the state. It seems utterly ridiculous. It's another trick of the duopoly of the corporatist cronies in Harrisburg to keep control of their power and not turn the power back over to the people of the state. So I am absolutely appalled by prison gerrymandering.
Dr. Clements?
Gerrymandering by any type is just something that we should be opposed to. And I have to agree with Mr. McMaster. It's just a way of them being able to continue their control of power, and it needs to be something that we not do in the state of Pennsylvania.
Mr. Krebs? Mr. Krebs, you are muted.
I agree with both these gentlemen. It is a terrible thing. And really, reading up on this, I found that by prison gerrymandering, we've taken 2 House of Representatives, PA House Representatives seats away from Philadelphia. Don't tell me it's not a partisan ploy by one party to move those districts out into the rural areas. And that may be a good thing for the rural people, but I'm just telling you from a democracy standpoint, this is a terrible thing to do.
Thank you. We'll start with Dr. Clements for this next round of questions, which is supporting equal pay for equal work should be a nonpartisan issue. Will you work to support legislation that requires and enforces equal pay for equal work?
Absolutely.
Mr. Krebs? I think you are muted again, Mr. Krebs.
Absolutely. I would support that.
Mr. McMaster?
I would absolutely support that. Although it is my understanding that such a law nationally already exists. So creating more law in Pennsylvania seems a bit redundant, but I would absolutely support that happening. Yeah, why wouldn't I?
I think we have time for one more question. We'll start with Mr. Krebs. What is your stance on climate change? On the impact of climate change in Pennsylvania?
I really think that climate change is one of the most serious issues facing the earth. There are going to be countries that disappear. And we always tell unwanted immigrants, go home. What if their country's underwater? What are we going to do? You know, when you see climate change anywhere, you know, people, when you talk to the long-term planner for Miami, they ask, what's your plans for 50 years? They said, well, we're moving 4 million people to Orlando because we're going to be underwater. That type of migrations, when you look at Bangladesh is going to lose 70 million people, be homeless. Somebody's going to sell them guns. Then it'll be an interesting world because you're going to say, go home. Well, they're going to say, no, we're going to take this land. We don't have any place to go. So we need, as a world people, we have to address this thing. It's more serious than any of us exist. Today I heard the thing about the glacier, the big glacier is melting from underneath in Antarctica, and that's going to be a dramatic raise. Are we going to even have northern New Jersey or Delmarva or southern Florida? This is serious.
Thank you. Mr. McMaster?
Obviously, climate change is real. It's happening. To the degree to which it's happening, I think is probably where the debate lies. One of my biggest problems with a bill such as that is that it puts way too much power on the government to pick winners and losers. So it's going to outlaw one energy source while subsidizing another one that's not efficient or is unproven in the marketplace. What we really should be doing to address this is removing all subsidies from every energy, be it oil, natural gas, fracking, whatever. Remove the subsidies to it and put everything on a level playing field and let the market figure it out. If somebody comes along like an Elon Musk who can figure out a way to make solar panels that produce just as much energy as oil or a nuclear plant, then absolutely he should be able to bring that to market, and the market will decide what's fair and what works. I think putting the government in control of something like that is like putting the government in control of anything. If you put the government in control of the Sahara Desert in 5 years, you'd be out of sand. So putting the government in charge of things is always a mistake, in my opinion.
Dr. Clements.
Well, I'm an environmental hawk, and Mr. Krebs can attest. He's been out to my farm. He's seen my 2 substantial solar arrays. I live off the grid. I produce energy, and that's something that I wish we had more time to talk about, because I think that farmers should be energy producers. We have chunks of land on our farm that are not viable for much of anything. But boy, you put a couple of solar arrays on there, and you put $35,000 a year in your pocket with green credits. But if we don't address this problem, and we're really late to the ball game in addressing it, I agree with Mr. Krebs. We're going to be in some serious issues, and not just serious issues because we're going to be flooded or we're going to have different temperatures at the time of the year we don't expect it. There are going to be geopolitical issues associated with climate change. Yeah, there will be climate change wars, because there will be people that will be moved from their lands, and they're going to want to take other lands. And stronger people will be kicking weaker people off of their property. So it's something that needs to be addressed, and we need to get busy. And kudos to Tom Wolf for trying to get 50% of the state's energy from solar.
Thank you. The league has told me that we have time for one more round of questions. I'll begin with Mr. McMasters, and the question is, are you in favor of increasing funds for farmland preservation efforts?
I'm absolutely in favor of farmland preservation. As the owner of 16 acres where we raise goats and cattle, I'm absolutely for preserving that. Unfortunately, I think again, this is like my Sahara sand analogy. It's once you start putting the government in charge of those things, that's when you have all the sticky fingers coming in and getting involved, where the money that's supposed to go for farmland preservation suddenly now is funding a road in the middle of nowhere, or a highway, or a bridge. All great things, mind you, but they're not using the money that was allocated for farmland preservation for that. So it's a kind of a dual-edged sword. While yes, I absolutely support farmland preservation, and we do that on our own simply because it makes our land more valuable and it makes our land more productive, but we choose to do that. The government hasn't come in and told us to do it, and we don't take any government money for doing that, because we're doing it ourselves, and it makes our farm much better. And that's why we do it, because we're volunteering to do it, not because the government has come in and told us we had to.
Thank you. Dr. Clements.
Land preservation is an excellent idea. If we don't do something to preserve some of our farmland, I think we're going to end up 50 years from now saying, my God, we've got housing developments and factories and storage unit places in land that is very viable for growing crops, and now we can't do that. But you have to agree with Mr. McMaster is that these programs have to be monitored carefully. That's something that Eagle Eye Dr. Clements, the senator, would do, is that we have this money that comes into the state for things like that. Federal funds come into the state for things like that. And all of a sudden it seems to scatter and go all over the place. Where it gets earmarked for is where it needs to end up. And we need to have better supervision of the dollar trail so that it ends up preserving farmland, not roads, so that it ends up doing what we asked it to do, not in somebody's pocket.
Mr. Krebs.
Yeah, I'm a strong supporter of ag preservation, and I think that we need to come up more funding sources to save the land, because you talk to the largest farmer in this area, and his biggest concern is farm preservation. He says, I can't be very public on this because some of the thousands of acres that I farm are owned by developers. And all I'm doing is carrying it for them until they decide to put a tract development on it. So we have, and the poor farmer, I think these two gentlemen are farming with money. I farmed without money. Luckily, when I sold my farm, I was able to sell it to a dairy farmer. But a lot of the farmers, they cannot sell it to a dairy farmer because it's their retirement and they need to get the biggest buck possible. And once it gets to the developer, you're going to have a tough time preserving it because he's waiting to make cash in and make the big bucks. So, I mean, we have to do it now because if we don't, we're going to lose our agricultural heritage in Pennsylvania, which has been going on for over 300 years. We have some of the best farmland in the world, and I hate to see it all go under development.
Thank you. And with that, we are done with the question portion of our debate. And now the candidates will have 2 minutes to make their closing remarks. And we will begin with Dr. Clements, Mr. Krebs, Mr. McMaster. So Dr. Clements, please.
So I want to thank you for listening. Voting is our most fundamental right in America, and being elected to serve is a privilege. I'm here today because I've lived the American dream, and I want others to live that dream too. Our children and our grandchildren need someone who will fight to be sure that they have an opportunity to have a good life right here in Pennsylvania and not have to move away to find a good job. Being elected is something that we're not entitled to. Being an employee of the Chamber of Commerce, as the gentleman that's not here tonight, doesn't give you any special experience that you will need to lead in Harrisburg. And having served previously and voted to approve a massive debt in the future is not a ringing endorsement. Disliking government and saying that you want to dismantle it, well, that just destroys democracy and causes massive harm to our families, our working farms, and our businesses. I've worked hard throughout my life, and I'm played by the rules, just like so many of you have. And I'm going to Harrisburg to fight for you, to save our farms, to reopen our businesses, to create jobs, and to make sure that we finish the job vaccinating all those people that we want to. And I'd like to convince many people that are maybe somewhat on the fence. I rose from welfare, and I'm opening to a highly successful veterinary chain right here in this district. I didn't inherit my wealth. I earned it. I earned it by working 70, 75 hours a week. And like so many of you working people in Pennsylvania, I had to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and I did. We have lots to do. We must change the tone of divisiveness, and we must return to civility and common sense in politics. We must focus on election integrity and make sure that everybody who wants to vote can vote, and safely and easily. And we've got to deal with that pension debt. It has created a major monster in Pennsylvania. It is skyrocketing our school taxes, and it's putting us on the edge of bankruptcy. My name is Calvin Clements. I'm asking you for your vote on May 18th.
Thank you, Dr. Clements. Mr. Krebs.
I'm the only person with experience in Harrisburg in this race, and I'm only running for 18 months. I'm not going to run next year if I get elected for another term. I basically want to start the process of ending the gridlock and creating a balanced budget and fair districts. I want to do that, and I think it takes experience to do that. I'm the one who fought the breaking up of making Lebanon County an orphan in the 2001 gerrymander. I was there for the 1991 gerrymander. I'm experienced, and that experience is like I have a PhD too. I could be called Dr. Krebs if I had wanted to, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do is solve problems and use my experience to start the reform. And hopefully maybe one of these two people can succeed me and have learned from some of the things I accomplished in the next 18 months and can build on that so that we make Pennsylvania better in the future and end the silly gridlock and corruption that we see there now. Thank you. I'm Ed Krebs. I ask for your vote on tomorrow in Lebanon County. You could be voting by mail if you wanted to. Or on May 18th, if you're going to do it the traditional. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krebs. Mr. McMaster.
Thank you. For sure, I am the one and only true political outsider in this race that's seeking this seat. I'm not a career politician, nor am I a person who has ever previously sought an elected office. I'm a father, a son, a husband, a grandfather, a farmer, and a citizen, a concerned citizen that has seen Harrisburg and the political class that habits it, and inhabits the General Assembly transform the Keystone State itself into a national punchline. Our current gubernatorial administration and its party is best known for staging theatrics for the cameras while funneling COVID positive patients into elder care facilities, but only after they shuffle their own folks out first, their own loved ones out first. The current party that's in the majority in the General Assembly has spent the last 6 months relitigating their unconstitutional election laws that they themselves voted for. The corruption and the stink of corruption coming from the capital city is legendary. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania's economy itself, excuse me. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania's economy itself, oh my God, remains mostly locked down. Our infrastructure crumbles as farmland and private property are stolen through eminent domain. People's lives are ruined for possessing a legal plant in most of our neighboring states. And yet, like a sick joke, our taxes are raised at every turn and every transaction possible. And this legislature, which is among the highest paid in the nation, continues to do less and less of the actual work that the taxpayers of this state are footing the bill for. And I just want to put a stop to this madness. That's why in my first 30 days in the Senate, in addition to pushing to fully reopen Pennsylvania, I'm going to be introducing legislation to immediately slash the salaries of all elected officials, starting with the governor and down all the way to myself by up to 50%. I'm going to introduce legislation that slashes property taxes, and I'm going to work to reduce and eliminate the Pennsylvania state income tax. I absolutely support a constitutional carry in Bill 565. And I'm going to lend my support to Senators Dan Laughlin, who's a Republican, and Sharif Street, a Democrat, to fully legalize and decriminalize the adult use of recreational cannabis. And I'm going to work tirelessly to remove every single piece of the budget that wastes the hard-earned money of Pennsylvania taxpayers. My name is Tim McMaster, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. McMaster. And with that, the debate portion of our program has ended. It's been my privilege to be your moderator, and I will turn the floor back over to Shirley McCormick, the president of the League of Women Voters of the Harrisburg area.
Thank you. And I want to thank Corinna for an excellent job, and absolutely thank all three candidates. I think that the information that you provided this evening on a wide variety of subjects will help people to make a decision about the candidate they wish to have. And I am so sorry the Republican candidate could not join us so we could have a fair understanding of the differences. Again, thank you all for participating. Thank you, Corinna, and thank you to all of the people who joined us this evening. We hope you got a good sense of the candidates, and thank you for the questions. I think there were some excellent questions you all submitted. So we hope you got what you were looking for. This is recorded and it will be on our website within a couple of days. You will receive an email about that. And again, thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay.